What if you're not broken, but the world keeps acting like you are? At 40, Mark from Minneapolis has a stable job, a small house with a garden he's proud of, and a rescue dog named Lou. He likes movies, weekend hikes, and cooking meals just for one. But every family dinner, every baby shower, every casual, "So, anyone special?" from a relative comes with a quiet weight. He's never been married, never had kids, never even had a long-term relationship that lasted more than 2 years. Not because he didn't want to, but because the connections never stuck. And now, in his 40s, he feels invisible. Not lonely all the time, but different. Like he missed the train, and no one's talking about the people left standing on the platform. He's not bitter. He's not angry. He's just here. And he's starting to wonder, is this how it ends? Because in America, we celebrate couplehood like it's the only real life path. We ask kids, what do you want to be? Never, who do you want to be with? And then suddenly we act shocked when people don't follow the script. If you've ever felt behind, not because you're unhappy, but because you're off sequence, this one's for you. And if you haven't, hit subscribe. Because next week we're telling the story of someone who wanted love, but never learned how to keep it. This story came from a viewer named Mark. He wrote to us in July 2025, just after turning 40, a milestone that didn't bring celebration, but a quiet reckoning. His message began with 2 lines that hit hard. "I used to think I had time. Now I'm not sure I ever had a plan." Mark grew up in a small town in Minnesota, where life followed a clear path. Graduate, find a job, fall in love, get married, buy a house, have kids. His parents did it. His brother did it. By 30, everyone around him was either engaged or already a parent. He wasn't. He dated here and there, nothing serious. He was shy, thoughtful, the kind of guy who listened more than he spoke. Women said he was nice, safe, a great friend, but never the one. At 35, he asked himself a simple question. "Знаете ли вы, как выглядит ваше будущее?" He didn't, and that scared him. Not because he hated being alone, and he didn't. He liked his quiet mornings, his dog, the freedom to come and go. But he also missed touch. Missed sharing a bad day. Missed having someone who knew, without explaining, that he takes his coffee black and hates loud parties. He tried dating apps, swiped for years, went on first dates that felt like job interviews. One woman told him, "You're sweet, but I don't feel a spark." Another said, "You're too stable. I want someone intense." He started wondering, am I broken or just built differently? Then, in 2023, his dad passed away. At the funeral, relatives hugged him and said, "We're so glad your brother's here with his kids." No one said that about him. That night, alone in his childhood bedroom, it hit. Это перевернуло мою душу с ног на голову. Not because he resented his brother, but because he realized he wasn't just unmarried. He was invisible in the family story. The one who wouldn't carry the name forward. The one no one would remember in 50 years. And that grief, not for his dad, but for the life he thought he'd have, stayed. He started therapy, not because he was depressed, but because he was confused. Why did he keep wanting connection, but pull away when it got close? Why did he say, "I want to be loved," but freeze when someone got too close? His therapist asked, "When did you first learn that being alone was a failure?" He didn't have an answer, but he realized it was everywhere. Wedding ads that say, "Find your forever." TV shows where single characters are either tragic or wild. Friends who say, "You'll meet someone," like it's a law of nature. Even government forms. Marital status with no option for content, but alone. A 2024 Pew Research study found that 42% of Americans over 40 who've never married say they feel socially invisible, not because they're unhappy, but because the culture only sees value in partnership and parenthood. Mark isn't lonely every day, but he is lonely in moments. When a friend cancels plans because of a sick kid, when he scrolls through photos of family vacations he'll never take, when he realizes he has no one to call if he gets sick. And the hardest part? He's not trying to fix himself. He's trying to live in a world that doesn't believe his life counts. He's thought about adoption, about finding a partner later in life. But he's also thought, what if I stop waiting for a future I didn't design and start building one that fits? Now, before we get to what he's discovered, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt behind? Not because you're sad, but because you're off the timeline? Do you still hope for love? Or are you learning to love the life you have, not the one you were supposed to have? Drop your story in the comments. Not to compare paths, just to say, I see you. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. Because next week we're telling the story of someone who wanted marriage. Not for love, but to stop feeling like a failure. Here's something you need to hear. Attention! This could change your day. Not because some grand moment happens, not because someone finally says, I love you, but because one quiet Tuesday you realize you're not broken. You just spent years trying to fit into a life that was never yours to begin with. For Mark, that moment came in April 2025. He was sitting in the park, feeding the ducks, a ritual he'd kept since his mom passed. Peanut butter sandwich, coffee in a thermos. Silence. And then he heard a woman say to her daughter, "Look, that man knows all the ducks by name. That's so sweet." He didn't know anyone was watching, he just came. Every week. To not be completely alone. And in that moment something clicked. Not because he met someone. Not because he suddenly wanted to get married, but because for the first time in years he felt seen. Not as a missing piece, but as someone who matters exactly as he is. Why making mistakes is necessary? Because without them, we never find out what truly fits. Mark made mistakes. He believed love was a requirement, not a possibility. That family only meant blood, that if you weren't married by 40, you'd failed at life. But every failed date, every "you're amazing," but wasn't a sign he wasn't enough. It was a sign he was close, that he was learning, that life was quietly saying, you're looking in the wrong places, or for the wrong things. He spent years trying to become someone lovable. Then he realized the real work wasn't about changing for love. It was about learning to live with yourself, not as a step toward a relationship, but as the goal itself. And here's the hardest, most honest truth. This broke my heart, but it opened my eyes. Not from one big tragedy, but from 1,000 small ones. Holidays when you're the only one without a +1. Friends who say you'll find someone, like it's a law of nature. The quiet ache of knowing no one will tell stories about you when you're gone. But it was that pain that finally pushed him to stop waiting for the right person and start building the right life. He didn't change himself for love, he changed for himself. He took a gardening class, started volunteering at an animal shelter, launched a small podcast, not for fame, but to say out loud what he'd only whispered before. And slowly, almost silently, loneliness stopped being emptiness. It became space. Space to breathe, space to grow, space to finally hear his own voice. Because here's the truth, love isn't always a person. Sometimes it's a morning when you make breakfast, listen to the rain and think, I'm doing okay. Sometimes it's a duck named Bob who swims over when he sees you. Sometimes it's a friend who lets you sit in silence on the phone. And it's still connection. Mark is still not married. He doesn't know if he ever will be, but he no longer sees that as a lack. He sees it as a chance to live outside the script, to be not a half, but a whole, to be visible, not because he's part of a couple, but because he's present. This isn't the end of a search, it's the beginning of a realization. I'm here. I'm alive. And my life, even if it looks different, still matters. So what did Mark learn? He learned that marriage isn't the only proof of a meaningful life. That love isn't something you find. It's something you build in all kinds of ways. And that being single at 40 doesn't mean you're behind. It just means your path looks different. He learned that loneliness isn't the same as being alone. One is a feeling, the other is just a fact. And in the space between them, there's room to grow. What would he change? He wouldn't have spent so many years believing he was broken. He wouldn't have measured his worth by relationship status. He'd have started building his own version of family earlier, not waiting for a partner to complete him, but choosing people who see him again and again. But he wouldn't erase the quiet years, the missed connections, the holidays alone, because they led him here and to a life not of resignation, but of quiet pride. Was it really a failure? No, because he didn't fail to find love. He succeeded in redefining it. Now he still hopes. Not desperately, not anxiously, but gently. If love comes, he'll welcome it. But if it doesn't, he's already building a life worth living. And that's its own kind of courage. If you've ever felt behind, not because you're unhappy, but because you're off the timeline, know this: you're not broken. You're not missing out. You're just living a story that wasn't promised but still belongs to you. Drop your story in the comments. Have you ever felt invisible because you're not married? Do you still hope? Or are you learning to love the life you have, not the one you thought you'd have? Your words might be the thing that helps someone finally stop apologizing for being alone. Hit like if this resonated. It helps others find this video when they need it most. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because every week we're telling stories like this. Real people, real lives, no scripts. Because here's the truth. Family isn't only blood. Love isn't only romance. And a life well lived doesn't need a ring or a last name to matter. Keep going. You don't have to be part of a couple to be whole. You just have to show up for yourself and for the life you're building. And that's more than enough.